Alright, Game and Compute. Welcome back. We're back here. We're going to talk about sourcing. So a lot of times when you're trying to have a side hustle of some kind, or get a kind of gig going that you've kind of created for yourself, one complicated aspect of it is, you want a pretty high profit margin, right? Nobody wants to do a whole lot of work. If you're reselling, buying something, taking all that energy to post something on the internet, taking all these pictures, writing all these descriptions, responding to potential customers, talking to people, and, having different issues for like $5, for like a $5 profit a week or whatever, it's like, maybe it's worth your time. Maybe it's worth your time if you don't really have like maybe like a significant goal, or if you don't need to really be dealing with somebody, like maybe it's going to be worth your time. Everybody's different, so I can't really say that $5 isn't worth it to anybody. But I feel like, you eventually get to a place where you want to scale up. Like when you're taking it seriously, you want to maybe first, pay for like one burger a week, and still have some of the profit left over, or pay for your $18.99 YouTube subscription once a month, or pay for your car insurance, or knock out a bill, once a month. You want to see some kind of progress, not just like, okay, I flipped this product and all that happened was, at the end of the day, after flipping the product, now I have $5 every week, which is $20 every month, which, now I can go watch a movie or something, go to the movie theater. Like, usually, for a lot of people, that might be worth it just to, like, test it and see if it works, but for a lot of people, that might not be the case. So yeah, that's probably the first step, is like figure out what's going to be worth it to you, because everybody's different. So I can't formally say, okay, $5 is nothing, $20 a month is nothing. To some people that might be good enough. It's like, but sometimes it's like, just test it, see if you can make the $5 a week or whatever, and then see if you can make $10 a week, and see if you can make $20 a week, and see if you can make $40 a week. And that's gonna usually over time become worth it more and more, to a point where you've really got something significant going. Now, I would say in general, one thing I've learned, as much as I love techie things, one thing I've kind of learned is when it comes to technology, you might have a little bit of an issue because there might be changes. You might have to deal with changes happening. You might have to deal with, technological changes. So I've talked about this time and time again, about how I had a lot of success with reselling iPhone 6. And we're trying to talk about sourcing here. And this is way back when iPhone 6 was not obsolete. And so it was worth it to people. It was kind of at a place where there were newer phones, but iPhone 6 was still valuable. And so there were people who had newer phones that would rather have the $40 cash for their old iPhone 6, especially if it had a cracked screen or wasn't working or had like a battery that wasn't holding a charge and things like that. Those were things that I would be able to easily fix just with a little screwdriver and a little adhesive. Take out the battery, put in a new battery. Take off the screen, put in a new screen. I think the main issue back then was the fingerprint scanner. The phone still had that home button, and I think sometimes there was an issue with that fingerprint button. But, you know, if I could resell it for $120, you know, I was sourcing it basically from clients or customers who had a need. And, you know, they needed $40. And so I was able to source it from them. Now, I could have sourced from eBay or other places, but that would have cut into my profit. Sorry, it's raining, and it's now raining heavily on top of the car where I'm recording. Sorry about this, guys. I'll try and talk louder. So, you know, you could try to determine how you're going to source something for the best possible profit, where other people are benefiting from your offer. And, you know, because they'd rather have $40 than a phone that's just sitting in the drawer that they're not going to use. They know it's still worth something, but they probably have a phone already if it's cracked and all this other stuff is going on. And so, just to reiterate what I've talked about before, the method I used was, let's say the 25th through the 1st of the next month, I would, you know, purchase these phones for $40 from people. I would set up, you know, appointments with them after work. I would usually meet at the same place, and I'd have like time slots where I would be available. I'd kind of call the shots on the timing, and there were certain days a week and certain days of the month where I would do this. So I had a system about it, right? So I wasn't just like randomly just like doing things, because that becomes a little difficult when you do things randomly. Not saying that you can't do it that way, but it can get a little bit tiring when you don't have like a routine. When you're just scattered and trying to meet people, then they're going to be late and then they're going to cancel on you. But it's like, but you had plans and you canceled your plans so you could go meet with this potential customer and like all these other things. So if you just have it set like 5:15 p.m. to like 6:45 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday on the 25th through the 1st or something like that, that's when you're buying phones, and then you're selling them throughout the rest of the month. And say you pick Sundays are the days that you're going to meet with people in person to sell them in person for cash for $120, you know, have them sign, you know, there's paperwork being signed on all ends. If you're dealing in cash, you know, getting people's IDs and all this kind of stuff. There's a whole method to it. And that worked for me, you know. I was sourcing them from people who didn't need them. Now, I could have sourced them from eBay or, you know, Walmart or some place that's like, okay, and now I'm trying to sell it at a profit. But if I was making about an $80 profit, you know, if I'm sourcing something from some other place where people are also trying to make a profit, you see what I mean? It's harder to source. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's harder to source from an option where they're trying to make a profit. Usually people selling their iPhone on eBay, they're the ones who also want $120 for the phone. And so maybe you can find them for like $115, maybe you can find them for like $110 or $100 or whatever. But trying to get down to a $40 range when people are trying to make a pretty big profit off of it, because they're not trying to sell like broken stuff for parts, and it's harder to test it because you're not in person. And you might get taken sometimes too. And so it's just, harder to kind of figure out that piece. Like when you're trying to get into reselling, I think one of the harder pieces is definitely that issue. So yeah, that's going to be one of the harder issues is sourcing, right? Especially when you're trying to source and everybody's trying to make a profit. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like a win-win-win situation. There's really nothing of an issue with that, but you kind of have to think about that. So iPhones aren't the only thing that I've had an interest in. I haven't sold like coral or mushrooms from, those kind of reef tanks, but that's another, I've heard about people growing mushrooms either in those containers, or I think one guy was growing worms or something, like he was farming worms or something like that. I think another thing that I got into was those Zimbabwe $100 trillion banknotes. So the issue with the banknotes is that you kind of have to wait till the availability dries up, because you're buying them when they're low. There's kind of like a bit of a market for them. Like you kind of have to consider the market for them, if that makes sense. So when there's a lot of them available, it was the 2008 uncirculated $100 trillion Zimbabwe banknote. When there's a lot of them available on the market, you can't buy them as cheap. When there's a lot of them available on the market, you can buy them cheap. And then what you have to do is you have to wait. So it's possible to flip those even still, but it's like you have to wait until the market kind of changes, So it does work, but it's not 100% of the year or 100% all the time that you're going to be making the same amount of money. It's kind of like a bit of like, it's kind of like investing, like buy low, sell high, so it's kind of that whole idea. But it's easy to source them online. You got to know the product a bit, but I've had good experience with those. It's just, people caught on to that market, and so you're basically selling to collectors, but then you're buying from people who are, trying to, make a profit and sell something that they don't really want anymore. Like they're usually selling them. And so, you usually source them from people who don't want it, who are selling it because they want money. It's harder to source them. I've never been able to source them from like one of those collector, like those coin and banknote collector companies, because they charge a lot of money. They're almost charging full price like almost all the time, and so it's really hard to get a lower rate. They're almost always charging the highest rate. But the good thing about those sites is that if you are a collector, you're getting good quality all the time. You don't have to worry about somebody scamming you or whatever, because it's like a company that's already established. And I think it was from O'Neill as well, I learned, Nate O'Neill, is that his name, Nate O'Neill? I also learned, I think he was the one who was talking about worms and mushrooms and coral. I think Graham Stephan was talking about coral. I think he was the one. And so those are some areas where you can kind of, source things. You have to learn, though. You can't just like blindly go in. Like usually you're going to start small, start with something that's like, okay, I can grow this. That's one way of sourcing things, is if you grow things, legal things. I'm not saying like grow something that's illegal where you live and try to sell it. Grow something legal that sells. One thing that's hard to get out here that is popular in LA, lion's mane mushrooms. You can find them at like Sprouts and Whole Foods and places like that. I don't know if you can find them at like Vaughn's and Ralph's and those types of like Stater Brothers and those types of like stores, but I know you can find them at like, organic places, but they run out a lot too. I mean, and I just imagine, if you were growing your own, those kits aren't that expensive to buy, and you could, I don't know the market for it, but I just know I like buying stuff like that, and I can almost never find it. And so I'm like, somebody's buying it, because I look, at the store and see what they have kind of available, and I've seen that they have them, but I think I've only once been able to purchase them from Sprouts, market. And you could probably sell them at the farmer's market in person. There's a place out here in LA called the Rhodium. I don't know if you're allowed to sell food there, but there's a local farmer's market like once or twice a week, not far from there. But places like the Rhodium, I think it's like a $15. I don't know the price. Let me be honest. I don't recall the price. But if you had something like coral, I mean, the hard thing about coral is the tanks. It's not free. You have to get this filtration system. You're working with like live organisms, so you don't want to damage them or kill them or injure them or anything. You have to be careful with them. Sometimes you'll have fish, some people have fish in those tanks. You have this whole like little ecosystem that you're growing, and you're having to keep it alive in this tank. And, so it can be portable, because I've seen people do these, like, go to these frag conferences, and they make it so it's portable, and you can take it to different places safely. But it seems a little risky to me, because, like, if you lose it, or if you damage it, or if something's leaking or whatever, it's like you really have to be careful. So I'm not trying to discourage people. I'm just saying it seems like a good market, but it would take a lot of researching. I myself am kind of interested in it, because I'm like, I just like watching people talk about their tanks and stuff, and I think it's really fascinating. It's really cool. It's beautiful to look at, even if you're not going to buy or sell any of it, but it seems like a great hobby to get into. It seems like there's a pretty steep learning curve, and there's a lot to learn. But if you're into gardening and things like that, you could probably find a way to do something garden-wise, fruits, vegetables. There's certain things like sugarcane. I mean, I don't know if you can grow sugarcane everywhere. I live in LA, so it's like the weather in Southern California is pretty decent for growing things. Like, we don't have like snow coming over here where I live, and the weather's off during winters and stuff, and you notice that the gardens get affected, but it's like we have decent luck with growing a lot of things year round, or you can even have a decent winter garden. But there are times of the year where like certain plants just don't do well at all. But there are a lot of people that are interested in things. My mom is really big into gardening, and she doesn't really sell things. She does like exchanging on occasion, and like some people want certain seeds of certain things. Like my dad sometimes brings stuff back from like Zimbabwe or South Africa, wherever he's traveling in Africa. Sometimes he'll bring back different types of pumpkin seeds, different types of corn seeds, like stuff that you can't really even get out here. And we've got some farmland where he kind of has access to things, and like a lot of people that we know in those like friends of the family and family members, extended family members, they grow a lot of organic, natural, produce and all kinds of plants and things. And so we have a bunch of like cherry moya and all kinds of stuff that you can't really get. You can't just go to the store and like buy these things out here. You could probably buy them online, but it's like, if my mom wanted to like sell seeds or sell like saplings, and or sell like new sprouts of different things, if she wanted to do that, she could probably make pretty good money, because she has access to a lot of like rare things. And I live in an area in LA where people are very health conscious, and they care, and they want to know about different plants and try different things for like health benefits. And every country and area of the world has their own types of plants that do well or that are native. And if you have a similar climate but you can't really get the actual plant, you could still, they can still thrive where you live. And just people like to learn, like even growing indoors, you can get like grow lights, grow bags, those grow tents and things, and grow things indoors and like just learn. It's just sometimes, unfortunately, the learning curve results in lost money, killing the plants, or if you're doing plants or any kind of like animals or anything like that. But you can find methods to source things if you're actually growing them or making it or producing it yourself, versus having to buy things to resell. So those are like two different methods where, you might not have to have you would have to learn the skills, but it's like you can learn them within like months, weeks, instead of like, if I want to make some kind of like software, I'm not saying I couldn't make it in like months, but I literally have to like learn how to code and do all this stuff or outsource all that work. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying like these are a different form of ideas where it's like you can, the sourcing is kind of like, the place you want to look at sometimes too, which is something I don't hear people talking about a lot. They want to talk about the profit, the revenue, but they don't really talk about, well, how do you get the things to sell? How do you get to the point where you have something that you can sell and get the profit and get the max amount of profit, and your work ethic, pays off, your work energy pays off, and you're able to kind of like not have such a saturated market, and also something that maybe is so technologically strange that it's going to be changing all the time. You want to just make sure you kind of have something solid. And it doesn't, I wouldn't say it doesn't hurt, but it's not a bad idea to try different things. I like talking about the things I've tried because I feel like not everybody's listened to every episode, and it might give you more ideas. But try to watch people, like hobbyists, like watch people with their hobbies online and see what they do and see how they buy stuff and for their hobbies, just people who have all kinds of hobbies. And then look at the other side and see, are there people buying these things? And is this something I'm interested in enough to like do? That's one method of like figuring out what to do. It always seems like, oh, I want to buy and resell things, but sometimes it's hard to make a profit, and you got to get creative with it. So I would say, look into things that maybe you don't know too much about quite yet, but you can learn. You can learn, and you can try, and you can test. You have to be patient. As I always say, I wouldn't recommend just like invest like $2,000-$3,000 in something right away and just try to like buy a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to resell. It's like test one or two items first for like a small amount of money, and then learn from that. Did they sell right away? Is it the season? Are you selling some Halloween thing that's like, it's only going to sell during Halloween? Like nobody's going to buy this any other time of year. You got to kind of understand the market, understand the customers, understand the quality, understand what's bad quality, understand what people want, and see if it's something that you can kind of manage over time without it being like, oh, this is only going to work for this month every year. And if that's what you want, that's fine. Or this is only going to work for this year because they're coming out with a new version, and then this old version is going to become obsolete. And so now I'm either going to be forced to learn the new version, and then how am I going to source the new version? Because when something's brand new, it's going to be hard to get old things to resell where people are going to sell it to you at a cheaper price because it's brand new now. Like things like the Oculus and things like that, they have like older versions, but they're, it's, I don't know. There's certain things. It just kind of depends what angle you want to take, what niche you're kind of interested in. But that's one method to look at is, when it comes to like things you can grow, things you can plant, things you can make yourself. that cuts down on sourcing costs a lot, but you're going to have to test it and see kind of what's going to work. Um, See what actually interests you too, because if it's not interesting to you, you're probably not going to do it, in all honesty. Um, or you're not going to want to do it for very long. Like, you'll do it for a while and then you'll be like, like, I got to wake up and do this again. Like, you want something you're passionate about, something you can kind of geek out on. I like instruments. I like, I really like coral and mushrooms and like plants and things like that, but it's like, you know, I've never gotten like deep into it, but there's certain stuff that I've thought about, like, especially like lion's mane and different types of mushrooms like that, where I'm like, you could easily sell these. Out here, you could easily sell them even in person because it's like, it's hard to get them, and people like it. There's a market for it. It might be like a trendy market, but, like, remember back when people were talking about like ginkgo biloba and stuff like that? Like, there's certain stuff where you're like, over time, like, nobody's talking about it anymore, but, when something's hot, sometimes you can just learn about it, like, see what people are doing and kind of make it work for yourself, But yeah, that's kind of all I have to say right now about different types of products and things. Those are just ideas. I'm always working on my own projects with things, so I don't really want to give away exactly what I'm doing, because I know people do this whole copycat thing and then they saturate the whole system, and then it's like, well, I shouldn't have said anything. So, but I've just thrown out ideas that people are already doing and experiences I've had of what I've done. You can do things with the newer phones, like, it's harder to flip like brand new stuff if you're using that same method where people are potentially going to buy the phone when they are going to have rent due or something, or they're going to sell their phone when they have rent due because they would rather have that amount of money, and it's enough money for them to sell it to you if they're not using it, but it's not so much money that, you are coming out of pocket too heavily it's cutting into your profit margins too much. But yeah, guys, stick with it. It's a new year coming. I would recommend for people to try to get some new projects going. People who are into this kind of stuff. You got to do your research though. But the best place to start doing research is just kind of see what other people are doing for their hobbies. Learn about those hobbies. If you have an interest in a certain hobby, if you play Magic the Gathering, if you do this, if you do that, see what it is that people are buying. Maybe it's not specific cards. Maybe they want the mats. Maybe they want the card holders. Maybe they want a branded like book that has like, that they can store their cards in. Maybe they want the sleeves, that say Magic the Gathering on the back of them. You can brand stuff like that. You can make, well, I don't know if you can brand it legally, but you can make, things that are within a niche of something you like and something and sell things to the community, things that they want, things that they might like, things that they would enjoy. So think about it. I'll be posting some more when I have more updates, but that's kind of my latest update that I was thinking about lately, that I was like, sourcing is kind of a big deal. And it's hard to just generally talk about how people can source things. I think that's one big method is, going the hobbyist route, seeing where the holes are in those hobbies. Like, you can go into other fields and things too, but it's like, hobbies are a good one. Devices are a good one too, but just the thing is with devices is they change over time. Some devices stay pretty valuable, like for example, certain types of technology for what do you call it? I'm blanking. So, my brain, guys, sorry. Certain types of technology for like instruments, like drum machines and things like that. They can be a little bit old, and people might still want them. Turntables and stuff like that. Like, people still buy old like musical technology Like, they might not buy the old software too much, but hardware, and especially if it's in really good condition, people might want that kind of stuff. So if that's something that you're interested in, I mean, it's just a matter of, like, how are you going to find it? Like, can you find, like, 100 units that are good and working that you can buy for a low price and sell it at a pretty decent profit? And some things you have to consider: how big is it? How much is it going to cost to ship? If you're not doing, like, OfferUp or Craigslist and meeting in person and stuff like that, you got to consider, how's this going to work, I prefer in-person cash. It's a little inconvenient, but then you don't have to deal with the shipping. And so, but shipping, if you have shipping opportunities, it gives you more reach, because people all over your country can buy from you. I don't really do international. Digitally international, I don't really mind that, but I don't really deal with international because that's too much for me. But once I'm done with certain projects, I don't mind talking about them, because I'm like, I don't really feel like it's a big deal to talk about them once I'm done with it. But while I'm working on them, I'll talk generally about it. But yeah, guys, that's it for now. Thanks for listening.